This is a fascinating story I want to talk about now. So there's a Conservative MP, a guy called Nick Fletcher, who says that. I'll let you judge for yourself what he says, because he's denied blaming the female Doctor Who for pushing young men into crime. But let's hear exactly what he said. This is a clip of what he said in the House of Commons, or in a House of Commons debate, I should say, earlier this week.
There seems to be a call from a tiny yet very vocal minority that every male character or good role model must have a female replacement. One only needs to look at the discussion surrounding who will play the next James Bond. And it's not just James Bond. In recent years, we have seen Doctor Who, Ghostbusters, Luke Skywalker, The Equalizer, all replaced by women.
Okay, let's see what he was saying there, because he's denied he blamed a female Doctor Who for pushing young men into crime. It was an International Men's Day debate, and he said, well, as we heard there, a tiny yet very vocal minority of people who want to replace every male character or good role model with a woman, leaving young men with the likes of the infamous Craze or Tommy Shelby from the crime drama Peaky Blinders as role models, warning masculinity was being vilified. Well, let's talk about this with Emily Carver, social commentator. Emily, you're very welcome to Talk Radio. Thanks for making the time this morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thanks. What do you make of Nick Fletcher's comments? Do you think that he talked sense, or do you think he was perhaps going a little overboard?
You know, I think he certainly didn't do himself any favours by using that rather cringeworthy example of Doctor Who and other TV programmes. You know, I don't think many people in this country believe that a woman playing Doctor Who or Luke Skywalker is what's pushing young men into crime. I don't think many boys actually watch those programs anymore. But, you know, I also think more broadly, there's not much of a link between TV violence and real world crime. So that's worth noting. But I don't like the way that everyone jumped on him without engaging in his wider point. You know, this was a 33-second clip that came out of a very long and thoughtful speech by Nick Fletcher. This was just one example. He used to demonstrate how men may be seen to be sidelined, or may see themselves as being sidelined in a world where women and minorities, we talk about empowering women and minorities all the time, but we don't talk so much about boys and men, and they too need role models. You know, there are so many, you know, columns by feminists and women that talk about how it's so important for women and girls to have you know, role models on the screen, in the media. So why shouldn't that be the case for boys and young men? I mean, you know, this guy who clipped this 33 seconds, he's now got 7.2 million views on it. You know, every single Labour MP and feminist columnist and all sorts has jumped on it.
Yeah, it is definitely a bit ridiculous. It's definitely a bit ridiculous. It's definitely a bit ridiculous to say that you know, having a female Doctor Who pushed young men into crime. But I'm not sure he was actually even saying that. But it's an interesting wider point. I mean, of course, having female role models, having minority role models, is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I think it should be encouraged. But it's interesting as well in terms of the fact that people feel there aren't male role models, because I mean, there are lots of male role models out there. There are lots and lots and lots of men in you know, very powerful positions. So I wonder why people feel there is some sort of assault on masculinity necessarily. Why people feel that it's wrong to be you know, that we should be promoting. I mean, equality pushes everybody up, doesn't it? It doesn't mean that you have one race or one ethnicity or one sex which is being promoted at the expense of another, does it necessarily?
No, I mean, it shouldn't necessarily. Of course, there's been a change in balance, inequality, as women have got more rights and so on, and have more roles in the media and every other industry and so on. So there will be some men who, just by virtue of that, don't like it and don't want to see women in powerful positions. But I think that, having spoken to a lot of people before I came on the air now, I think there is a concern that we talk a lot about toxic masculinity. We talk a lot about how masculinity can be bad. We talk about the bad sides. And in terms of on screen, I think there is a concern, and I think that there's some truth to this, that a lot of the male characters are either shown to be weak or bad in some way. There isn't that sort of...
It's really interesting as you mentioned this, obviously, because well, there are two examples we're going to cite. One is a bit more serious than the other, but of course, a lot of people say that Daddy Pig in Peppa Pig is teaching children that I mean, Peppa Pig is the cartoon we've been talking about all week because of Boris Johnson's chaotic speech, and a lot of people saying that Daddy Pig is not the most strongest example of leadership necessarily, and sometimes over promises and under delivers. I can't think of any parallels politically whatsoever that people might be referring to. And secondly, there's on a more serious note, there's a very gritty drama now on Netflix, which a lot of people are watching, called Maid, which M-A-I-D rather than M-A-D-E, which is, a lot of people saying that I personally haven't seen it, I don't know, but I've read a couple of articles about it, where it says that basically every male character is a horrible piece of work, essentially, and only the women are good.
Yeah, I was going to actually bring up that Netflix series because I've just finished watching it.
Oh,
and
right.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. I would recommend it, but all the female characters are the strong ones who have been treated badly by men. All the men are weak, drunks, totally inadequate. And I do wonder whether that is trying to make some kind of political statement that men are weak or that they're a threat to women. It may well be that that's just one storyline, but it's hard not to see it as some kind of interpretation of male and female roles in society. And I think a lot of people, it's not whether you just have strong men in movies or on screen, but I think there's also the absence of that sort of strong father figure, which I think is actually crucially one of the reasons why we see crime in young men. I mean, there are statistics to show this. The Centre for Social Justice found that children from families with absent fathers are 80% more likely to be involved in antisocial behavior, 75% more likely to be involved in crime. So these statistics do speak for themselves. And that's not to demonize, single parents, single mothers, of course not. My mother was raised by a single mother for a lot of her childhood. So it's not to demonize, but we can't not look at these statistics, and they do speak for themselves in that respect. So I think rather than, whether Doctor Who is female or male, I think we should be looking at the question of male role models, because clearly young boys need strong male role models, and they don't want to always be depicted as weak or bad.
It's interesting you mentioned that as well, of course. I've just watched one Netflix series where there are definitely quite a lot of strong women, which is the fourth series of Selling Sunset. I don't know if you've seen that incredibly serious documentary about a series. It's this sort of really trashy docudrama about these very, very sort of glamorous women who elbow each other out of the way to sell property. It's really brilliant and just excellent. But anyway, Angela's been in touch actually on Twitter to say, I think Nick Fletcher completely missed the point. Many teenage boys are growing up without male role models at home or at school, although many look up to football and music stars as role models. His speech was clumsy and pretty boring. And one texter, who I think is perhaps tongue slightly in cheek, says, can we have an overweight, non-Christian, bold trans woman to play in the next Bond, please? Which is the one thing I always felt very, very sad about, Emily, I don't know what you think about this, was the sort of body shaming on Love Island. They said we want real people on Love Island, and as an overweight 37-year-old with, who has sort of quite pale skin and not in any way, sort of mahogany tan, with a bit overweight. I think I'd fit in Love Island. I think I'd represent the people.
I think that's one of the only TV shows that hasn't been able to go woke in that respect and try and get diversity of shape, of body size.
Yes,
I just don't think it would quite work.
No.
It's just be left with the unfortunate looking ones on the sidelines, stuck with themselves, I imagine, because everyone on that show seems to be so shallow. But I just want to come back on what that lady tweeted you. I would just say, and I mean, I don't know Nick Fletcher personally. I don't know that much of him. He's just a backbencher to me. But he did highlight a lot of important things in his longer speech. I had a read of it before I came on, and he said he highlighted how boys are lagging behind at school. He highlighted how suicide rates are far higher for men. He highlighted how, 83% of rough sleepers are men, that life expectancy is lower, that they're more likely to be in prison. He also said that, that his quest to sort of uplift young men and boys must not come at the expense of the progress women have made. And he talked about his daughter and how much, he's proud that she has more opportunities. So it was not a sort of, female bashing speech at all.
Emily Carver, thank you so much. A lot of sense spoken by Emily there, social commentator Emily Carver.